The Alpha King bought her at the auction for revenge. Unaware her secret shocked the entire pack, the great hall of the capital was alive with shadows and whispers. Lanterns swayed gently, casting golden light on the polished stone floor, while a quiet murmur filled the room. Nobles in long, flowing cloaks and intricate masks mingled with mysterious figures whose faces were hidden, their eyes gleaming unnaturally. This was not a place for ordinary people, and certainly not for ordinary souls. It was the night of the forbidden auction, a gathering whispered about in every corner of the kingdom, where secrets were traded as carefully as gold and power. At the center of the hall, a long platform rose like a throne of judgment. The audience's eyes flicked back and forth between the items for sale, rare artifacts, enchanted weapons, and even creatures of unimaginable beauty, and then they rested on the final offering of the night. She stood silently, a woman whose presence seemed to bend the light around her. Her hair fell like a river of midnight silk, and her eyes were deep, dark pools that seemed to see everything, yet reveal nothing. Her name was known only to a few, Lyra. But even the whispers surrounding her were tangled in mystery. Some said she came from a distant, cursed forest. Others claimed she carried powers no mortal could understand. Kalen, the Alpha King, entered the hall with the quiet weight of authority. The murmur of conversation faded as he passed, all eyes turning to the man who ruled the northern packs with an iron paw. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair as dark as the storm clouds that often rolled over the kingdom's mountains. His eyes, the color of molten gold, flicked around the room with a predator's instinct. Kalen did not come to this auction for curiosity or leisure. He came for revenge. A rival noble family had humiliated him, spreading lies that threatened his power and the loyalty of his pack. Tonight he would make them pay, not with violence, at least not yet, but with something far sharper: control. The auctioneer's voice rose above the room, smooth and hypnotic. "The next lot is," he paused, letting the suspense curl through the air like smoke, "a rare and remarkable woman said to possess secrets hidden even from the gods. She is Lyra." A hush fell. Lyra's eyes, calm and unwavering, met Kalen's across the hall. For a moment a strange flicker passed between them, unspoken yet electric. She did not bow, did not plead, did not show fear. And yet Kalen felt a twinge of something he had not felt in years, curiosity, sharp and insistent. The bidding began. Wealthy nobles raised their hands with gold and promises of favor, each trying to outshine the other. But Kalen, silent and deliberate, waited. His patience was a weapon, and when he finally raised his hand, the room seemed to shiver. He bid a sum so high, so deliberate, that all others fell silent, hesitant to challenge the Alpha King. The auctioneer's gavel fell. The decision was final. Lyra was his. As his guards moved to escort her from the platform, Lyra's eyes lingered on Kalen. She spoke softly, her voice barely more than a whisper, yet it carried across the space between them. "Not all battles are won by force." The words struck Kalen like a blade. Who was this woman who dared to speak to him so boldly, already twisting the edges of his patience and control? The journey back to Kalen's castle was quiet, except for the subtle tension between them. Lyra walked with poise, never looking directly at him, yet somehow Kalen could feel her gaze in the shadows of the carriage. His mind raced with thoughts he could not name. She was supposed to be a tool, a weapon of humiliation against his enemies, but she was far more than that. She carried herself with an air of confidence that both irritated and fascinated him. Once inside the castle, the guards left them alone in the grand hall. Kalen stood in the center, studying her as she moved. She examined the room quietly, touching the carved pillars and tracing the edges of the tapestries, as if assessing more than the beauty of the castle. There was intelligence in her movements, a careful grace that betrayed experience and awareness. Kalen's instincts told him that she was not a woman to underestimate, and perhaps, for the first time in his life, he felt uncertain. "You will follow my rules," Kalen said finally, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of tension. "And you will speak only when spoken to, unless you wish to anger me." Lyra's lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. "Rules can be broken," she said softly. "Some must be broken to survive." Kalen's hand twitched, not in anger, but in an unspoken acknowledgement of her defiance. He realized that she was testing him as much as he was testing her. And in that subtle dance of control and challenge, a dangerous thread of connection began to form. Days passed. Kalen observed her closely, noting the way she moved through the castle, the way she seemed to notice things others did not. She avoided confrontations with his advisors but subtly influenced outcomes, shifting conversations and decisions without ever speaking openly. It unnerved Kalen, who was used to absolute obedience. And yet each small act of defiance drew him in further, like a moth to flame, until he found himself watching her constantly, measuring his responses and questioning his own instincts. One night under a sky darkened by a crescent moon, Kalen found Lyra standing at the balcony overlooking the northern woods. The wind caught her hair, tossing it around her face, and for a moment she looked like a spirit, untouchable and ethereal. He approached silently and she did not startle. "Do you understand what you've done?" Kalen asked, his voice low and steady. "Do you know the danger you bring into my castle?" Lyra turned her eyes to him, calm and unafraid. "Danger is everywhere," she replied. "But the true danger is in blind obedience, and you have been blind for far too long." Her words struck something deep within Kalen. He had spent years ruling through fear and strength, believing that control was power. Yet standing here, facing this woman who challenged him without raising a hand, he realized that perhaps there was more to strength than domination. There was subtlety. There was wisdom. And he admitted to himself there was something else, something he could not name, a pull he could not resist. Lyra stepped closer, but not too close. The air between them was thick, filled with unspoken thoughts and emotions. Kalen wanted to reach out to assert his authority, yet he hesitated. She was no ordinary woman. Every instinct in his body screamed that she was more dangerous than any rival he had faced, more beguiling than any temptation he had known. And still, he could not look away. Then, as if sensing his turmoil, Lyra whispered a single word, "Prophecy." Kalen's head snapped toward her. "What do you mean?" he demanded, a shiver running down his spine. She did not answer fully. Instead, she looked out toward the dark forest, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I am not what you think," she said, "and soon, what you believe about your enemies and yourself will be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine." Kalen felt a chill creep through him. The certainty that had guided him his entire life wavered for the first time. This woman, whom he had thought to control and use, was already controlling him in ways he did not understand. And the more he tried to resist, the more he found himself drawn into her orbit. The night stretched on, filled with the quiet hum of the castle and the distant sounds of the northern wilderness. Kalen could not sleep, haunted by her words and the flicker of something dangerous and beautiful he had glimpsed in her eyes. Lyra, in her own chamber, sat quietly by the window, watching the moon drift across the sky. She was aware of the pull he felt, and she allowed it, carefully, like a thread she was ready to tug at when the time was right. In the silence of the night, a fragile tension settled over the castle, a mixture of fear, fascination, and something neither of them could name. The Alpha King, who had believed himself invincible, now found himself facing uncertainty. And the woman he had bought for revenge, who had seemed so fragile, was slowly revealing that she was a force all her own. As the first light of dawn touched the towers of the castle, neither Kalen nor Lyra slept. Both were aware that the game had only just begun. And in that quiet, the unspoken truth lingered. The destiny of the Alpha King and the mysterious woman was bound together in ways that neither could yet fully understand. Outside, the northern wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets of old curses, hidden prophecies, and the first stirrings of a power neither Kaelin nor his enemies had ever faced. And in that whisper, Lyra heard her own name, carried on the wind, as if the world itself was waiting to see what she and the Alpha King would do next. The day ahead would bring challenges, tests, and revelations. But for now, the tension between them remained unbroken, electric, and full of promise. In the quiet, dark heart of the castle, a story of revenge, mystery, and the faintest spark of something more had begun, and neither of them could turn away from it. The days after the auction moved slowly through Kaelin's castle. The walls, carved from black stone and echoing with centuries of history, seemed colder than ever. Kaelin, the Alpha King, paced his private chambers more than he usually did. He had planned to use Lyra as a tool, a pawn to humiliate his rivals. Instead, she had unsettled him completely. Every glance she gave, every quiet movement, reminded him that she was not a woman to be tamed. Lyra, meanwhile, moved through the castle with silent grace. She observed everything, the way the guards slept while leaning on their spears, the way the servants whispered in corners, the way Kaelin's advisors whispered about their ruler with both fear and awe. Lyra noticed more than most. Her eyes missed nothing. She had not yet revealed the depth of her abilities, but she did not need to. Sometimes, watching and knowing was enough. She understood the fragile lines of power that crisscrossed the castle like hidden paths in the forest, and she quietly placed herself where those paths might converge. Kaelin watched her constantly, more than he cared to admit. He tried to focus on his duties, meeting with his advisors, checking on the northern borders, managing the packs under his rule, but her presence lingered at the edge of his mind. He had never felt such a pull toward a person before. Usually, power and fear were enough to command respect or submission, but with Lyra, it was different. She challenged him in ways that no one had ever dared. "You cannot control everything," she said to him one evening, appearing in the hall without announcement. Her voice was calm, but each word carried weight. "There are forces in this world beyond even your strength, Kaelin." He froze. Her words, spoken softly, were sharper than any blade. "Do not lecture me," he said, his tone steady but his chest tightening. "I am the Alpha King. Strength and control are my weapons." Lyra smiled faintly, a curve of lips that seemed innocent yet cunning. "Strength alone will not save you," she replied. "You must see what you cannot fight. You must understand what you cannot bend." Kaelin felt a rush of frustration, but beneath it, a strange curiosity. He did not know why her words affected him so much. He had always been confident, unyielding, a ruler who feared nothing. Yet in her presence, he questioned even the simplest decisions. And that made him uneasy. The days passed, and strange things began to happen in the castle. Guards reported seeing figures in the shadows, whispers in the corridors when no one was there. Small accidents disrupted daily routines. Letters disappeared, candles toppled over, and doors closed by themselves. Kaelin's advisors whispered of curses and dark magic, but Lyra quietly intervened, guiding him away from blame while subtly demonstrating that she understood the deeper currents at work. One night, during a hunting expedition in the moonlit forest outside the castle, Kaelin insisted she come along. He wanted to test her, to see if she was as fragile as she seemed or as cunning as he suspected. The forest was alive with nocturnal sounds, the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of wolves. Shadows stretched long across the path, and the air smelled of frost and pine. Lyra moved with effortless grace, sensing danger in ways Kaelin could not. When a rival pack tried to ambush them, she warned him silently, pointing to subtle movements in the brush. Kaelin shifted his stance, alerting his guards to the threat, and together they repelled the attackers. Kaelin's heart pounded not from fear, but from the awareness of how indispensable she had become. He could not deny the growing respect he felt for her, nor the pull of something far more complex. After the ambush, they stood in the clearing under the silver moonlight. Kalen's chest heaved as he looked at her. "You are unlike anyone I have ever known," he admitted, voice low and steady. "I do not understand you." Lyra's eyes met his, calm and steady. "I do not wish to be understood," she said softly. "I wish only to be seen." There was a silence between them that stretched longer than either expected. In that moment, Kalen felt exposed, not as a king, but as a man, and that exposure terrified him. He had never wanted to be seen. He had never allowed anyone to see beneath the armor of strength and authority. Yet, standing in the forest with Lyra, he realized that her presence stripped away that armor whether he liked it or not. Back in the castle, life became a delicate dance. Kalen maintained his authority, but he watched her constantly, noticing the smallest gestures, the quiet intelligence in her eyes, the subtle ways she influenced the people around her. Lyra, for her part, did not act openly against him. Instead, she guided events with quiet precision, sometimes saving him from political blunders, sometimes steering decisions that would keep the castle safe. One evening, Kalen found her in the library, standing before a large, ancient tome. Dust covered its pages and the faint smell of old parchment filled the air. She did not notice him at first, absorbed in the symbols and lines of the book. "What is that?" Kalen asked, stepping closer. Lyra did not look up. "It is a record of old prophecies," she said softly. "Lines that speak of kings and rulers, of curses and redemption. Some of them speak of you." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "Speak of me? What nonsense is this?" She finally met his gaze, her eyes steady. "Not nonsense, warning. You have made enemies, yes, but there are forces at work that you cannot see. The prophecies speak of a ruler who will face trials that go beyond the battlefield, beyond the strength of his pack. And they speak of someone who will stand beside him, someone who will test him in ways no one else can." Kalen felt a shiver run down his spine. Her words were not threats, but they carried weight. He did not fully understand what she meant, yet he could not dismiss her. There was truth in her tone, in the calm certainty of her gaze. As days turned into weeks, the tension between them grew. Kalen's respect for Lyra deepened into something more complicated, something he did not dare to name. He was fascinated by her intelligence, her courage, and the subtle power she seemed to hold over events and people. At the same time, he struggled with the desire to dominate, to assert control over her. The push and pull between them became a quiet game, full of unspoken words, stolen glances, and moments that left Kalen unsettled. Lyra, aware of the effect she had on him, moved carefully. She had no desire to manipulate him for her own gain, yet she understood that power was never simple. To survive in a world ruled by strength, she had to navigate carefully, testing him, guiding him, and revealing just enough to make him see the truth without giving away her full power. Then, one night, a strange event occurred that would change everything. A messenger arrived from the rival noble family that Kalen had sought to punish. The message was not in words alone. It carried a mark of dark magic, a warning of danger to come. Kalen studied it, his jaw tightening. He had dealt with threats before, but this felt different. This was not just a rival or a challenge. It was a test, a shadow of something larger that neither he nor his advisors fully understood. Lyra approached quietly. "You cannot face this alone," she said. "There are forces that will test both your strength and your wisdom. You must listen, not command." Kalen turned to her, feeling a mixture of frustration and admiration. "And what would you have me do?" he asked. "Trust me," she said simply. "Just for now, trust me. The answers will come, but only if you are willing to see beyond your pride." For the first time, Kalen considered that perhaps he was not as invincible as he had always believed. Perhaps there were things he could not control. And perhaps, he realized with a jolt, Lyra was not just a tool for revenge. She was something far more dangerous, someone who could challenge him, guide him, and perhaps change him forever. As they prepared for the coming threats, Kalen found himself standing closer to Lyra than before. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Not because he needed her, but because he could not ignore the pull between them. Every glance, every movement, every word carried weight. And in that quiet, tense space, Kalen realized something he had never admitted to anyone, not even himself. Lyra was no longer just a woman in his castle. She was becoming the center of his world. The northern winds howled outside the castle walls, carrying whispers of old curses, hidden prophecies, and dangers yet unseen. Inside, the tension between Kalen and Lyra thickened, a subtle, unspoken connection that neither could name. The days ahead promised challenges, tests, and revelations that would demand all of their strength, courage, and understanding. And in the quiet of the castle, in the space between the king and the woman he had bought for revenge, a fragile thread of trust began to form. Fragile, yes, but unbreakable in its potential. For Kalen and Lyra, the real battle was not outside the castle, nor in the rival packs. The real battle had already begun, in the hearts of two souls drawn together by fate, prophecy, and a dangerous spark of something neither fully understood. The forest beyond Kalen's castle stretched endlessly under the pale light of the moon. Shadows danced between the trees, twisted by the silver glow and the soft rustle of leaves in the night wind. Lyra had led Kalen here, insisting that the answers they sought would not be found within the stone walls of the castle. The northern woods had a way of hiding truths, and yet they also revealed them to those willing to see. Kalen was not certain what to expect, but he followed, knowing that Lyra's insight had already saved him more than once. The path was narrow, overgrown with vines and brambles, and Kalen moved cautiously, his instincts sharp. Every sound seemed louder in the stillness: the snap of a twig, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through the branches. Lyra moved ahead of him, her footsteps quiet, deliberate, as if she were part of the forest itself. Kalen's mind wandered briefly to the lessons of the past weeks, her warnings, her careful interventions, and the strange pull she had on him. He had always believed he could control everything, bend everything to his will, but Lyra had proven him wrong at every turn. "You are thinking too much," Lyra said softly, as though reading his mind. Her voice carried through the darkness, calm and soothing. "Your strength is in your instincts, Kalen, not your pride." He stopped, looking back at her. "And you," he asked, "is yours in prophecy or in guiding me?" She smiled faintly, a curve of lips that did not reach her eyes. "Sometimes it is enough to simply be present, to understand, to see what others do not." Kalen shook his head, frustrated and intrigued at the same time. He had ruled packs, commanded armies, and faced enemies who thought him invincible. Yet here in this forest, following a woman he had purchased for revenge, he felt uncertain for the first time in his life. And strangely, he did not entirely dislike it. As they walked deeper into the forest, the air changed. The shadows thickened and the trees seemed older, their branches gnarled as if they carried centuries of secrets. The wind carried a scent of something unfamiliar: ancient earth, damp moss, and something more, something magical. Kalen's senses sharpened. He could feel the forest watching him, feeling him, testing him. And then, without warning, Lyra stopped. "Something is here," she whispered, her eyes scanning the darkness. "Be ready." Kalen's hand went instinctively to the hilt of his sword. The shadows between the trees shifted, and a group of figures emerged, moving with a silent grace that was almost unnatural. They were not like ordinary attackers. Their eyes glimmered faintly in the moonlight, and their presence carried a weight of old power. Kalen recognized immediately that these were the scouts of the rival pack, the ones who had been sent to challenge him before. But there was something more, something he could not yet name. Lyra stepped forward, calm and unafraid. "You do not need to fight," she said. Her voice carried authority, and even the shadows seemed to hesitate. "This is a test, not of strength but of understanding. The figures paused, their movements hesitant. Kalen frowned. He had fought countless battles, faced armies, and commanded loyalty through fear and force. And yet, here, in the quiet forest with Lyra at his side, he felt powerless in a new way. He could fight, yes, but would fighting bring the answers he sought? Or would it only deepen the shadows that surrounded him? Lyra raised her hand slightly, and the figures shifted again, as if responding to her presence. "You are tied to this place," she said, her voice low, "and to each other. To survive, you must see what is hidden, not what is obvious." Kalen studied her, the words echoing in his mind. He had always believed that control and power were enough to protect his people, his kingdom, and himself. But now he began to understand that there were forces beyond brute strength, forces that demanded insight, courage, and the willingness to see the truth, even when it was painful. The scouts, realizing that direct confrontation would not yield results, retreated silently into the shadows, leaving Kalen and Lyra alone. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the pale moonlight. "They were bound to the rival pack, yes," she said. "But they were also testing you, to see if you are ready for what is coming." Kalen frowned. "And what is coming?" Lyra hesitated, her gaze drifting to the distant hills. "The curse that was placed long ago. It has been waiting for the one who carries the blood of the Alpha King, and it has chosen this moment to awaken." Kalen's chest tightened. He had heard rumors of curses in the northern lands, ancient magics that bound families, packs, and entire forests. He had never believed them. And yet, standing here with Lyra, sensing the subtle shift in the forest, he felt the weight of something immense and dangerous pressing against him. "Then we face it together," he said finally, his voice steady but carrying an edge of uncertainty. "Whatever it is, we face it together." Lyra looked at him, her eyes softening for the first time. "Do you mean that?" she asked, her voice quiet but earnest. Kalen nodded. "I do." They continued deeper into the forest, moving toward a place that seemed alive in a different way. Trees twisted around each other, forming arches and corridors as if the forest itself were guiding them. The air grew warmer, and a faint glow appeared ahead. Kalen's instincts told him that they were approaching the heart of something ancient. When they reached a small clearing, Lyra stopped. At the center stood a stone pedestal, worn by time and covered in moss. Upon it lay a crystal, pulsing faintly with light that seemed to respond to their presence. Kalen felt a strange pull, as if the crystal were calling to him, reaching into the deepest parts of his mind. "This is the heart of the forest," Lyra said softly, "the place where the curse begins, and the place where it can be broken." Kalen stepped closer, his hand hovering over the crystal. He felt the energy flowing from it, strange and intoxicating, and he realized that this was not a simple test of strength. To touch it, to command it, he would need more than physical power. He would need trust, understanding, and perhaps even faith. Lyra moved closer to him, her hand brushing against his arm. The contact was brief, yet it sent a shock through him. He wanted to pull away, to assert control, yet he found himself frozen. The warmth of her hand contrasted with the cold power of the crystal, and for the first time he realized that he was not facing the curse alone. He was facing it with her. "Focus," Lyra whispered, "not on the curse itself, but on what it binds. You are tied to it, yes, but so am I. Together we can unravel it." Kalen closed his eyes, drawing in a deep breath. The energy of the forest pulsed around him, flowing through him, and he felt the weight of generations pressing down. Memories of past battles, past losses, and past mistakes filled his mind. He saw visions of the rival pack, the threats to his kingdom, and the fragile balance of power that had always been at his command. And through it all, he felt Lyra's presence, steady and unwavering, guiding him. When he opened his eyes, he saw the crystal responding, light spreading through the clearing like veins of silver. The forest seemed to breathe around them, and Kalen felt a sense of clarity he had never known. The curse was not simply a force of destruction. It was a reflection of fear, pride, and past mistakes. And to break it, he would need to confront those parts of himself he had long ignored. Lyra watched him silently, her hand still resting lightly on his arm. There was trust there, fragile but real, and Kalen realized that this trust was more powerful than any weapon he had ever wielded. He had faced armies, rivals, and even death itself, yet he had never known the strength that came from shared purpose and connection. Hours passed in the clearing. Kalen and Lyra worked together, their focus unwavering. The forest seemed to respond, guiding them, testing them, and allowing them small victories that built toward the larger goal. And through it all, the tension between them deepened, not through conflict, but through shared understanding and the quiet acknowledgement of something neither fully dared to name. At last, the crystal pulsed brightly, and the energy around them shifted. Kalen felt a release, as if a weight he had carried his entire life had been lifted. The curse, or at least the first part of it, had been broken. And yet, even in that victory, there was a sense of foreboding. Lyra turned to him, her eyes reflecting the silver glow. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "The curse is old and it has many layers. What we have done tonight is important, but it is not enough. There is more to face, more to understand." Kalen nodded, a mixture of relief and determination in his gaze. "Then we face it together," he said again, stronger this time. And as they stood in the heart of the forest, bathed in silver light, Kalen realized something that frightened and exhilarated him at the same time. He was no longer the alpha who ruled through fear and strength alone. He was something more, something vulnerable and strong at the same time, guided by the woman who had once been his pawn but was now his equal, his partner, and perhaps something more. The forest was silent around them, but the northern winds carried whispers still, whispers of rival packs, ancient curses, and hidden prophecies that had yet to unfold. And in that silence, Kalen and Lyra knew that their journey had only just begun. The castle stood quiet beneath the eclipse of the sun, the sky turning a deep, shadowed red as the northern winds howled around its towers. Kalen stood at the balcony, watching the horizon, the heavy weight of responsibility pressing against his chest. The prophecy and the curse they had begun to unravel in the forest were only part of what awaited him. The rival pack knew of Lyra's hidden lineage now. Her blood carried ancient power, the kind that could reshape the kingdom. They would come, and when they did, the Alpha King would need more than strength. He would need understanding, courage, and trust in the woman who had become more than his companion. Lyra approached silently, moving as if part of the shadow that clung to the castle walls. Her presence was calming, even in the chaos that seemed to coil around them. "Kalen," she said softly, her voice carrying over the wind, "they will come, and this time they will not merely test us. They will try to destroy everything." Kalen turned to her, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly at the sight of her calm eyes. "Then we must be ready," he said. "Not only for them but for ourselves." Lyra nodded. "The curse has layers. The eclipse will awaken parts of it that were asleep for centuries, and only together can we face what is coming." The guards began to prepare, sharpening weapons and closing the castle gates. But Kalen's attention remained fixed on Lyra. She had grown into a figure of quiet authority in his eyes, no longer the mysterious woman he had purchased for revenge. She was his equal, his partner in a battle that went beyond armies and swords. And somewhere, deep within, he realized she had become the center of his world. As night fully fell, the rival pack arrived. Their figures emerged from the shadows of the forest, lit by the pale, blood-red light of the eclipse. Wolves with golden eyes, hunters with weapons that shimmered with strange magic, and nobles who had allied themselves against Kalen all moved with precision, confident that they would claim victory. But Kalen did not feel fear, not with Lyra beside him. Together they were a force the rival pack could not fully anticipate. The battle began quietly at first, with scouts testing the castle's defenses. Kalen and Lyra moved together, coordinating silently, their actions precise and instinctive. Kalen's strength and command were unmatched, but Lyra's insight and subtle influence guided the movements of his forces, preventing mistakes and turning potential disasters into victories. In the midst of the chaos, Kalen found himself fighting not only with sword and strength but with restraint. He had always relied on his dominance to control situations, but here he had to trust in Lyra, trust in his pack, trust in the forces he could not fully see. And in that trust, he discovered a strength he had never known. Lyra, meanwhile, confronted the rival leaders who had come to claim her power. Her presence was commanding, her gaze unwavering. She did not need weapons to hold them at bay. Instead, she revealed fragments of her ability to perceive the threads of fate, showing them visions of their defeat should they continue to act against her and Kalen. The rival leaders faltered, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. It was a quiet power, subtle yet undeniable, and it shifted the balance of the battle without a single strike. Kalen watched her, awe and something deeper stirring within him. The woman he had once purchased for revenge now stood as a beacon of hope and authority. And in that moment, he knew that his feelings for her had evolved beyond respect or fascination. He cared for her deeply, and he realized that he had always cared, even before fully understanding it. As the battle reached its peak, the eclipse darkened further, casting an eerie shadow over the castle and the surrounding forest. The rival pack, desperate and cornered, began to summon forces of their own, spirits bound by old magic, creatures born of shadows and fear. Kalen's pack met them head-on, but even the strongest warriors were challenged by the supernatural power unleashed. Lyra stood beside Kalen, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Focus on the heart of the battle, Kalen," she said softly. "Do not fight what you cannot see. Fight what matters." He nodded, understanding at last. Strength alone would not save them. They had to act with clarity, trust, and understanding. Together, Kalen and Lyra channeled their combined power, not only their physical abilities but their insight, their connection, and the deep bond that had grown between them. The forces of darkness faltered under their unity, the rival pack breaking in confusion and fear as their plans unraveled. Finally, as the eclipse reached its peak, the last of the rival forces retreated. The castle stood intact, and Kalen's kingdom remained safe. Yet there was no celebration, only the quiet realization that the battle had changed them both. They had faced not only external threats but the fears, pride, and hidden shadows within themselves. And through it all, they had emerged stronger, united, and transformed. Lyra turned to Kalen, her eyes reflecting the fading red light of the eclipse. "The curse is broken," she said softly, "but the power it carried, the choices we made, they will echo. There is still more to face, though now it is ours to decide." Kalen took her hand in his, a gesture of trust and acknowledgement. "Then we face it together," he said. "Whatever comes, we face it as one." For the first time, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet relief. No words were necessary. Their connection had been forged in battle, struggle, and shared understanding. The tension, the longing, and the unspoken emotions between them had reached a point of clarity. They were no longer alpha and purchased companion. They were partners, equals, and perhaps even more than that. The castle's halls, once filled with whispers of fear and authority, now echoed with the quiet strength of two people united. Kalen walked through the corridors with Lyra at his side, not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as a man who had learned the value of trust, humility, and love. And Lyra moved with him, no longer the mysterious figure in the shadows, but a guiding presence whose wisdom and courage had saved them both. Outside, the northern winds whispered through the forests and mountains, carrying tales of battles fought and victories won. But they also carried warnings, subtle reminders that the world was vast and full of forces yet unseen. Kaelin and Lyra understood this. They had faced the first layers of the curse and emerged victorious, but they knew that life would continue to test them. And yet they were ready, not because they were unafraid, but because they faced the future together. That night, under the stars returning after the eclipse, Kaelin and Lyra stood on the castle's highest tower. The moonlight illuminated the world around them, casting silver paths through the dark forests and winding rivers. Kaelin looked at Lyra, her hair catching the light, her eyes calm yet full of determination. "You are remarkable," he said softly. "I never imagined I could ever meet someone like you." Lyra smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile he had seen from her. "And you," she said, "are capable of more than you allow yourself to see. You are not just an alpha king. You are a man who can change the future for your people and for yourself." Kaelin felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with power or victory. It was quiet, steady, and real. He had faced darkness, curses, and enemies, yet nothing had challenged him more than the quiet strength of the woman beside him. As the night stretched on, they spoke quietly, sharing fears, hopes, and the glimpses of dreams they had long kept hidden. The castle, the kingdom, and the world outside continued as always, but within these walls, a story of trust, transformation, and the quiet power of connection had begun. And even as they stood together, a shadow moved beyond the forests, watching, waiting. The prophecy had been fulfilled in part, the curse broken in its first layers, but there were still mysteries to uncover, powers to understand, and challenges yet to face. The world was vast, and destiny had not finished its work. Kaelin and Lyra did not flinch. They had faced uncertainty, darkness, and danger, and they had survived. Together, they were stronger than the forces that sought to break them. And in that strength they found something rare: hope, trust, and the possibility of a future shaped not by fear or vengeance, but by love and understanding. The night passed, and with the dawn, a new era began. The castle stood tall, the kingdom secure, and two souls who had once been bound by circumstance now stood bound by choice, courage, and an unspoken promise. Whatever the world threw at them next, they would face it together, their hearts intertwined, their fates no longer separate. And somewhere in the distance, carried on the northern winds, whispers of prophecy and old magic hinted at the next chapter, one that would test them, challenge them, and demand that they remain united. But for now, in the quiet light of a new day, Kaelin and Lyra stood as equals, partners, and the beginning of a story that was theirs to write together.